At this point, we all know about the hot mess that is FNAF Security Breach. Most of the community thinks that the entire franchise is going off the rails. Didn't we used to have a game about haunted animatronics? How did we get here? Well, what if I told you that everything can be traced back to one man? But yeah, I'm not joking. This mildew-covered rabbit is the reason we're here in the first place. And no, I don't mean that I think that William Afton got us here. Obviously he got us here, he made everything. I'm talking about specifically the FNAF 3 rabbit. This piece of shit Springtrap. It's all his fault. How? Well, let's take a look at where we are and step backwards to get there. What's the deal with Security Breach? It's a lovable mess for sure. It's a new direction for the franchise, shifting away from point-and-click horror and more towards free-roam sci-fi survival. However, due to the deadlines and pushback and scope creep looming over the company, Steelwool unfortunately had to under-deliver. And while they've made commendable strides to fix the actual bugs and glitches with the game, it's clear that the game itself is broken down to the core, and no amount of patches can fix that. Okay, so we know what the deal with Security Breach is. But we have to ask ourselves, why are you like that? Well, let's look at the game that came before it, FNAF Help Wanted. The VR culmination of everything that was FNAF. Many people's favorite FNAF game, mine for sure. A showcase of most games prior, either in literal recreations or gameplay in the style of them. Not to mention plenty of new content as well. Fully updated graphics, with all of the animatronics being fully 3D and animated, looking as good and terrifying as they ever had. We also received plenty of new lore and potential antagonists with this William Afton Rotom of a Digighost glitch trap. And whoever Tape Girl is. It's Vanessa, but we didn't know that at that point. So, because we had this huge scope of a game and a new tech-based villain, it made sense to up the ante, increase the scope, and continue with this sci-fi through line, trying to lean even harder on what they thought made people like FNAF Help Wanted. So alright, we know why Help Wanted caused Security Breach, but what caused Help Wanted? Well, then we're gonna have to look Freddy Fazbear Pizzaria Simulator. This game was a mixed bag in a lot of ways. You have a lot of great and a lot of bad, not much in between. For instance, the gameplay during the day is actually a pretty fun restaurant builder. It's got some compelling lore, some really fun risk versus reward mechanics, and genuinely hilarious moments. But during the night, you have one of the longest, hardest, most frustrating FNAF experiences in the franchise. If you're salvaging everything, of course. Speaking of salvage, some of the best horror in this franchise comes from the salvage minigame. Having to sit across from these towering robots, looking away to take notes, hoping they stay still, it's excellently done. In-game, however, these guys suck. The voice lines are a good touch, but the jump scares are so lame. However, props will always have to be given to the best cutscene and dialogue in the whole franchise, Henry trying to end it all. So yeah, if you have sort of a mixed bag trying to end your franchise, make sure to one-up it and just make a big blowout, fix everything people were complaining about, make more animations, more 3D graphics, just really end this franchise on a high note. Since you already used up all the lore and ended everything, you gotta make new stuff, hence Glitch Trap and Vanessa, and even more stuff, because at that point, you really have to come up with some crazy ideas. You know, like an insane idea, like hitting the like and subscribe button because it really helps out my growing channel. Crazy ideas like that. Now, because we've done this a few times, I assume you figured out where we're going with this. Why is Freddy Fazbear Pizzaria Simulator like that? Well, again, because of its predecessor, FNAF Sister Location. FNAF Sister Location was one of the first huge departures from the FNAF franchise. I mean, it had voice acting and walking. Okay, technically 4 had walking, but this one counted. For the first time, it felt like we were playing a fully narrative game. The one hitch here is that the gameplay itself, except for this, was really easy. Most players don't really get stuck until night 4 from my experience. Not only that, but the lore introduced, while thematically cool and interesting, started to go off the rails. Like, hard. I mean, Michael's a flesh puppet, the scooper, remnant. This was the first step in a lot of odd directions. And while attempting to wrap up some loose ends, Scott either unknowingly or on purpose frayed a whole bunch of new ones. So after this game, it made a lot of sense to make a harder game to try to end everything. Hence we have FNAF 6. Now again, we have to ask, why was Sister Location like that? Well, we step back in time to FNAF 4. To many people, myself included, this is the scariest game of the franchise. Also a game that gave us a lot of new lore. We were introduced to the crying child, we witnessed a kid die, all while fending off nightmarish versions of the Fred gang. This is actually the first game where there's a solid chance none of it is real. It felt like most of the game was new lore though, as it just kept piling on hints to more and more backstory, not to mention the game's brutal difficulty. The precision needed to hear the near silent noise cues is just simply insane, especially when going on to later nights. So yeah, the game basically introduced a whole bunch of new lore without essentially answering any of the questions it raised, so we needed a clean-cut game to explain what the hell is going on, aka Sister Location. And now,
it's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
This scrunkly old beat-up 5-gum wrapper of a rabbit. How did he create this? Well, let's look at what FNAF 3 specifically was meant to do, and then how it failed doing that. A lot of people theorize that once FNAF 1 was a success, Scott planned to release a tight trilogy, a second game to expand and explore the lore, and a third game to burn it all to the ground and tie up loose ends. The second game went off without a hitch. Now all he needed to do was stick the landing, and we can end the franchise mainline games on this nice wallpaper-esque end screen. One problem: he forgot to make the third game scary. Specifically, the only creature that can hurt you, Springtrap, is objectively not scary. Almost everyone thought so. This Peter Rotten Rabbit couldn't hurt a fly if it tried, so Scott realized he couldn't end his legacy on that. Therefore, he went and made the scariest game he could, something to really terrify the fanbase. But because every game before it had some kind of lore, he needed to make sure that this one did too. But the lore he had to introduce had too many loose ends, so he had to make another game to tie them all up. Well, 2 games actually. And finally he was done. To capstone the achievement, he worked with Steel Wool to make FNAF Help Wanted, a love letter to the franchise and some fun original lore for a twist. But the fans liked it a little too much and demanded answers, and the franchise demanded money. But the bar for a good scope was already set so high by Help Wanted, they needed to go big or go home, and thus we have Security Breach. So did that make sense? Did you follow me? Springtrap and how unscary he is the little butterfly effect that led us to Security Breach. And technically the upcoming free DLC as well. You've heard of Ruin, right? If you haven't, you have to click here because there's so much going on with that DLC. I'm really excited for it, and it's gonna be free. But shout out to the best patron, Emberisk, and until next time, as always, stay toasty.